All right, we're going to take a look at the spread of Islam as part of our exploration of golden ages, and in this case, it's the golden age of Islam. Let's take a look at what the reasons for success were. First of all, the weakness of the Byzantine and Persian empires played a role. So at about the same time that Islam was rising as a religious force, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian empires were actually entering a period of weakness. Also, persecuted peoples welcomed Muslims as liberators. So many people living in the parts of the world where those Muslims had shown up had felt like they had been either occupied or controlled by other people that were in charge at that time. So, for instance, maybe the Byzantine Empire itself, maybe the Persian Empire. And so when the Muslims arrived, they were seen as liberators, not as conquerors. Also, people had an attraction to Islam's religious message and its economic benefits of being a Muslim. So, again, the five pillars of Islam, the message that Muhammad was bringing about monotheism, were things that appealed to people. But also, if you were doing business and you were a Muslim, you would be taxed at a different rate. So, Muslims were taxed at a different rate than non Muslims and Muslim controlled areas. So, again, many people convert to Islam not just because of the message, but also because there were economic benefits in doing so. Also, tolerance of other religions which chose not to convert to Islam. So, when Muslims did conquer the territories that they took control of, they didn't go in and sort of just wipe everything out and kill everybody who wasn't a Muslim. In fact, they encouraged people that lived there to convert to Islam, and many people chose to do that. Those who did not, though, continued to practice the religions that they held. So, perhaps they were Christians, perhaps they were Jews. But in these early days of Islam, there was a high degree of tolerance on the part of the Islamic peoples who controlled those areas after they conquered them. All right, so what happens during this time period then is what we'll refer to the Middle East as sort of a crossroads of trade and ideas. If we go back to about the 600s, what we'll see is that Arabia connected the major ocean and land trade routes together. So it was centrally located between Asia and the European world, and even close to Africa as well. So again, they traded with India and China via the Silk Roads. And these trade routes helped to spread the Islamic religion outside Arabia. So again, economic benefits were part of the spread of the religion, but also these trade routes facilitated the movement of the religion to other places as well. Let's take a closer look at that map. And what you can see is this map has some pretty good detail. You can see the Byzantine Empire is located in orange here on the key, and you can see that these regions up here in orange are the location of the Byzantine Empire around the Eastern Mediterranean. And then the Sassanid Empire here is in purple, okay, and that's the Persians, and you can see that that area was located here. You can also see here that there are yellow land routes marked on the map and red sea routes that are marked on the map that reflect the trade routes in 570 AD. Now, these trade routes connected the Asian world with the Eastern Mediterranean, and it put Arabia right in the center. So these trade routes facilitated the movement of goods back and forth. So, for instance, things like spices, incense, perfumes, precious metals, ivory, and silk would be transported along the old Silk Roads through the central part of Arabia to the Eastern Mediterranean. So this location was great, and it also facilitated not just the trade of goods back and forth, but also of ideas, and in this case, the idea of Islam spread along these same trade routes. All right, we're going to switch gears now and take a look at the rival factions within Islam. What we need to be aware of is that there's more than one type of Islam, and so we're going to look at the two major branches of Islam that would have originated back in this time period. Okay, we'll start off with Sunnis. Sunnis are the majority branch of Islam. They make up about 83% of all Muslims. And what they believe is that the caliph, or the leader, should be chosen by leaders in the Muslim community. They also believe that the caliph should be a pious Muslim, not a religious authority. And they believe that the inspiration for the caliph comes from Muhammad's example. So again, what Sunnis basically believe is that the caliph should be picked by members of the Muslim community, so people who are Muslims. He should be a sort of a good Muslim, but he doesn't have to necessarily be an expert in religion. And he should live his life the way that Muhammad lived his life. Now, Sunnis are different than Shiites. Shiites disagree with them about many of these ideas. Shiites are a minority group within Islam, and they represent about 16% of all Muslims. So you can see that they're a minority group. Now, they believe that the only true successor to the Prophet were descendants of Muhammad's daughter and son-in-law, Fatima and Ali. Okay, so the only person who could succeed Muhammad was someone who was related to him. They believed the descendants of the prophets were divinely inspired from God. So why should it be Muhammad's relatives? Essentially because God had picked Muhammad, and therefore his family was sort of chosen by God. Also, they believe that the caliph holds religious authority, so he can't just be an ordinary Muslim. He has to be somebody who knows a lot about the religion. Now, Ali was the fourth caliph, so this was Muhammad's son-in-law, but he was assassinated in the year 661. And then Ali's son was also killed. And as a result of this assassinations, martyrdom becomes a standard belief of Shiite Islam. So what that means is that martyrdom is the idea that you die for your cause. So again, this is something that's associated with Shiite Islam because in Shia Islam, there's this sort of tradition of some of their leaders having been assassinated, and so it's believed that they died for a cause that they believed in. In this case, they believed in their religious cause. So where do you find Shiite Islam then? You find it in Iran, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. And there are other places as well. So let's take a look at some of this. Well, again, we'll see here is a percentage chart just to help you visualize this, that the percentage today of Sunni and Shia Muslims worldwide. Sunnis make up 83%, and Shias represent about 16%. And then about 1% of Muslims are other types of Islam. So again, there's more than just two. Keep this in mind. We've seen this with other religions that we've looked at, with Judaism and Christianity. There are different types. In particular, maybe the biggest group of split between Christianity that most people are familiar with would be the difference between Roman Catholics and Protestants. Okay, so here's a map then that shows the religious composition of the core areas of the Middle East. So if I look at the Middle East and I try to break it up by religion, this is the type of map that I would get. So if I look at the key on the left here, I'll see the light green areas are where you find Sunni Islam, and the dark green areas here on the key are the places where you'll find Shia Islam. Okay, so Sunni is light green. I can see fairly large section here up in Turkey. There's sections over here near Afghanistan and Pakistan. Okay, and then along the Nile River in Egypt. Okay, and I also look here at this dark green for Shia Islam, and I'll see that it's mostly in Iran and in southern Iraq. Okay, so there's some other areas as well. There's a little strip here going right through the center part of Turkey. And then down here in Yemen in the south, you can see there's Shia Islam there. There's also Sunni Islam there as well. Okay, and then one area that might be worth taking a look at here is this light purple area on the key, Wahhabism. Wahhabism, you can see on the map, is found here in the central part of Saudi Arabia. So Wahhabism is fairly popular in Saudi Arabia today. Okay, so this map also shows you where Christianity in pink is, Judaism in orange, which of course is in Israel right here on the map, and then even Zoroastrianism in red. Not much. There's a couple places over here in southern Iran where it's still practiced. And other religions, of course, are shown in purple. But the primary religions that we see in terms of Islamic beliefs are Sunni and Shia. Now here's a map of Iraq, and this dates from about the early 2000s, just before America had invaded Iraq. And so if I take a look at this map, what I can see is that about 60% up here on the pie chart, 60% of Muslims in Iraq are Shia Muslims, and you can see that they dominate the southern part of Iraq. And then in the northern part of Iraq are what are known as Sunni Kurds, so these are Sunnis. The Kurds are a different ethnic group. They're not Arabs, they're Kurds. And then the Arab population that is Sunni, over here on the pie chart, is 20%. And you can see, so 20% of Arabs are Sunni in Iraq. So you have three major different groups here. We've got Sunni, and they're both Kurds and Arabs. And then we've got Shia, which are all Arabs. And so the problems that America may have faced when they had invaded Iraq weren't just political issues. They were also religious issues as well, because after the invasion, things didn't go so well, primarily because America wasn't prepared for what they had sort of tried to take over. What they tried to take over was a country that had a lot of religious diversity and had a history of conflict between these groups. So Sunnis and Shia Muslims living in Iraq did not get along well, and of course the Kurds in the north didn't get along well with the Arabs. So it was a complicated situation and may have contributed to why America had so many problems in Iraq. Here's a map that shows you a little bit more detail about the religious diversity of Iraq. And again, you can see orange on the key here is Shia, blue were Kurds, green is Sunni, and then in pink we've got Assyrians, Chaldeans, Armenians, which are all Christians, and there were some. There's not as many today as there once had been. And then we've got Turkomans in red and Mandeans in this sort of dark blue. And so again, there's a lot of religious diversity in Iraq, and that may have contributed to some of the problems that Iraq faces even today. And here's another map that gives you a really good idea of where Shia Islam is located. The key tells us that Shia Islam is located in these red areas, and you can see without a doubt that Iran is heavily dominated by Shia Islam. Okay, and again, southern Iraq also has some as well, and it's spread in other areas to the east and southeast of Afghanistan. So you can't understand the Middle East today, you can't understand Central Asia today without understanding religion, without understanding Islam, but the most important thing to understand is that there isn't one kind of Islam, there are different types of Islam, and as a result, that makes trying to sort of deal with the Central Asia and Middle East parts of the world a little bit more complicated in terms of politics, because one cannot factor out religion. One has to know something about the religion. Perhaps if America had known more about the religious diversity in this region before we decided to invade Iraq, then the situation might not have been as bad as it was, and we may have made a different choice based on our own understanding of the complexities of religion that already exist there.